The sea has always been a place of beauty and terror, endless in its reach and merciless in its nature. And for those tasked with guarding it, the weight of solitude is often far heavier than the storms themselves. A lighthouse stands tall as a savior to ships, its light cutting through the black abyss of night. But inside its walls the silence grows into something monstrous. Imagine standing at the top of a spiral staircase, with nothing but the groan of old wood and the distant roar of waves to keep you company. The air feels heavy, as if each breath carries the weight of centuries of watchmen before you, their whispers carried by the sea wind through cracks in the stone. At first, the quiet feels peaceful, even comforting. But days bleed into weeks, and the absence of human voices transforms into a suffocating void. Shadows stretch in unnatural ways against the walls, and you begin to hear faint echoes of footsteps, though you know the doors are bolted, and you are the only one inside. The first sign that sanity is slipping often comes quietly, like a whisper carried on a breeze that should not exist. Alone in the lantern room, the keeper sometimes hears murmurs rising from the base of the tower, low and indistinguishable, as if a conversation is happening just beyond reach. Descending the stairs, the voices vanish, leaving only the steady hum of the ocean pressing against the foundation. It is in these moments that reality begins to fracture, because the mind craves company so desperately it will create it out of nothing. The creak of the beams becomes the sound of movement, the rattle of the glass becomes a knock, and even the wind howling against the panes can sound like someone calling a name. When the keeper forces himself to laugh at these tricks, the silence only grows louder, wrapping around him like a living thing, squeezing tighter until he questions if the sea outside is less dangerous than the stillness within. Nights are the worst, because the darkness outside mirrors the emptiness inside the soul. The beam of the lighthouse circles endlessly, slicing across the waves, yet it brings no comfort to the man trapped inside its tower. He watches the light bend and stretch, and in its glow he sometimes sees the shape of figures standing in the mist, unmoving, watching him. He tells himself it is the fog, nothing more, yet every night the shadows seem closer, more defined, as if the ocean has decided to send its drowned to the surface. In the dead of night, he sometimes hears a thud from below, a sound that reverberates through the walls as though someone is slamming a door or dragging something heavy across the floor. But when he dares to investigate, the rooms are empty, his lantern casting trembling patterns across the stone walls, revealing nothing but his own unease. The tower feels like it breathes, expanding and contracting with each crashing wave, as if it is alive and aware of his fear. The endless repetition of days shatters any sense of time, and the keeper finds himself drifting between wakefulness and dream. He begins to lose track of how long he has been there, counting hours by the meals he forces himself to eat, though his appetite wanes as the silence gnaws at him. Sometimes he hears the faint strike of a clock that no longer exists, a rhythm that convinces him he is being timed, that something is waiting for his final slip into madness. At other times, he wakes in the middle of the night convinced that someone has been standing over his bed, watching him sleep, though the only evidence is his own racing heartbeat and the cold sweat soaking the sheets. The storm outside might rage and scream, but it is the quiet moments between that feel most suffocating, when the air grows still and heavy, and the sound of his own breath becomes unbearable. He wonders if the isolation is meant to test his devotion to the light, or if the light itself is the reason he is unraveling. What begins as harmless distractions soon evolve into something darker, until the line between hallucination and reality fades completely. He starts to hear footsteps pacing the stairs at night, steady and deliberate, climbing toward the lantern room. His lantern shakes in his hand as he listens, heart pounding, only for the sound to stop just outside the door. When he finally gathers the courage to fling it open, the stairwell yawns empty, spiraling downward into a blackness that seems deeper than before. He swears he catches glimpses of figures turning corners, their shadows retreating too quickly to follow, always staying just ahead, taunting his isolation. At meals, he feels eyes on him, as though unseen company sits across the table, watching silently. He eats quickly, unable to shake the dread that the seat opposite him is not truly empty, that the sea has sent someone back to keep him from being alone, though their presence is more dreadful than comforting. The whispers become constant, sometimes gentle, other times sharp, echoing through the stone halls like the cries of sailors lost at sea. They call to him in voices both familiar and strange, some pleading for help, others urging him to abandon the light. At times, they speak his name with such clarity that he spins around expecting to see a face inches from his own, only to find the room deserted. He tries to drown them out with the roar of the ocean, but the sea only adds to the torment, carrying with it the wails of those swallowed by the waves. The tower, once a place of duty and order, transforms into a labyrinth of sounds and shadows, a prison with no escape. Sleep becomes a dangerous surrender. For every time he closes his eyes, he dreams of being trapped beneath the water, lungs burning as faint lights circle above him, fading further from reach. The worst part of the isolation is not the voices, nor the footsteps, nor even the shadows that stretch unnaturally along the walls. The true horror lies in the doubt that grows inside the keeper's mind, the gnawing question of whether the things he hears and sees are fabrications of loneliness or glimpses into a reality the rest of the world is spared. He wonders if the lighthouse has always been haunted, not by ghosts of the dead, but by the living despair of every man who kept watch before him. Perhaps the tower itself remembers each soul who suffered in its halls, and now it carries their torment forward, passing it on like a curse. The thought eats at him, making the silence feel heavier, as though he is not just living his own madness, but the madness of countless others layered on top of his. The sea outside crashes endlessly, yet it feels quieter than the storm inside his head. Each day the keeper writes less in his journal, the pages left blank because words fail to capture the shifting nature of his reality. He finds himself speaking aloud to no one, answering questions that were never asked, laughing at jokes that were never spoken. The lighthouse mirrors his descent, groaning louder, the glass panes trembling more violently, as though the structure itself is feeding on his unraveling mind. He begins to fear the spiral staircase, convinced it twists deeper than the foundation, into places not built by human hands. Sometimes he stands at the top, staring down into the darkness, and swears he sees movement far below, as if something is climbing upward, patient and relentless. He no longer trusts the silence, nor the light, nor even his own reflection, which seems slower to mimic his movements, lingering with a half-second delay, smiling faintly when his own lips do not. The isolation strips away every layer of certainty until all that remains is doubt and fear, and the keeper realizes he has become both the prisoner and the jailer of the lighthouse. He wonders how many before him stood in the same place, listening to the same whispers, staring into the same shadows that should not exist. The ocean outside is merciless, swallowing men and ships without hesitation. But inside the tower the enemy is time itself, dragging its claws across the mind until reality becomes an endless storm. The light that was meant to guide others to safety no longer feels like salvation. It feels like a cruel reminder that safety exists only for those out at sea, not for the soul trapped within the walls. And so, as the waves crash and the wind howls, the silence inside the lighthouse grows louder still, echoing endlessly in the keeper's mind. until isolation itself becomes the most terrifying ghost of all. Tanensin.